Hello, everyone. Sorry I did not do a video last night. I was occupied with other things, but here I am. It's been kind of a long day, but the show must go on, and I must endure because trying to do videos every week, it can be kind of sometimes a pain in the ass. But nonetheless, here I am. Here I am. So let's talk about what recently took place in Germany. The defense minister of Germany, Christine Lambrecht, has decided to resign. Now, I understand that people resign, but I don't. Let me just rephrase. I find it difficult that it's the case every single time it's announced that a politician has resigned. I find it difficult that it's always the case that anytime a politician says that they are resigning, that they're actually resigning. Because I find it difficult to believe that people go through the difficult process of gaining a political position just to turn around and say, I'm leaving. Not saying it never happens. It obviously does. But I don't think it's the case every single time. I think there are cases where politicians are told to leave. They're told by people who are more powerful than them to get the hell out because you're ruining it for us for some reason, or you are a hindrance to our agenda. So Christine Lambrecht has resigned. Whether or not that is actually the case, we have yet to find out. If you look at her potential replacement, her name is Eva Hogel. Eva Hogel just recently stated that she wants to give another or a further 200 billion euros for the German military. Now, right after Russia invaded Ukraine, the Chancellor of Germany, Mr. Olaf Scholz, stated that he wanted to spend 100 billion euros on the German military, and this was a huge step for the revival of German military might in Europe. This was a turning point for Germany because since the end of the Second World War, the Germans have been expected to be pacifist or to be not involved in conflict and war. But that's all changing, and the post-war order is being abandoned. And that's what we are witnessing right now. We are witnessing the abandonment of the post-war order. And we have been witnessing this for quite some time now. I mean, you can go all the way back to the 1990s when there was a conflict in the Balkans and the Germans were pushing for the Americans to bomb Serbia. And the Germans were backing and arming and training the KLA, the Kosovo Liberation Army, which was a terrorist organization, a very violent criminal organization. And there were the Germans supporting it. So the Germans have always been looking for these opportunities to flex their capabilities and to try to expand their sphere of influence. And they've done a very good job in maintaining their sphere of influence in Europe, with the fact that Germany is the biggest economy in the continent. But the Germans are trying to go beyond just being the economic powerhouse. They want to be the military might of Europe. And this has an historical legacy. I mean, we have all heard of the Second World War. We've all heard of the Third Reich. We have all heard of the First World War. Well, before the First World War, when Germany was a brand new country at the end of the 19th century, the Germans were trying to be an imperialistic empire, much like a number of other European countries were. The British had their colonies, the French had their colonies, and the Germans wanted their colonies. The Germans were thinking, well, what can we colonize, right? We can't colonize India because the Brits already have that. It's going to be hard to colonize North Africa because the French have Algeria and they have Morocco. So what can we colonize? And the Germans concluded that they can colonize Europe. So began the commencement of the German Empire. The colony of Germany has historically been Europe. And there has been this, I don't know what you can call it, this will, this pursuit to power amongst the German nation for thousands of years. It's no surprise, it's no wonder that when the Romans were trying to expand their empire, their biggest hindrance in Europe was not the Gauls, it wasn't the Slavs, although these two peoples most definitely were very, very tough, and they posed a huge challenge to Roman expansion. But truly it was the Germans, and it was the Germans who eventually sacked the western half of the Roman Empire. So this is not a modern phenomenon. This is a very ancient reality for the German nation. And so you look at what happened after Russia invaded Ukraine. The Germans found their opportunity to talk about reviving their military might. And there was Olaf Scholz saying, hey, the Germans need to have the most powerful military in Europe. The Germans need to have a turning point. Let's pledge 100 billion euros for the German military. Okay. Well, it's been said in regards to this defense minister, Miss Lambrecht, that she was wavering in regards to giving military aid to Ukraine, and she was wavering in the pursuit of using this 100 billion euro defense budget. Basically, they were saying that she was weak and she wasn't very assertive behind the policy. But Eva Hogel, she has been very enthusiastic about this. She has been very enthusiastic about this idea of putting more and more money into the German military. And she has said that she wants to give a further 200 billion euros for the revitalization of the German military. So it makes you wonder why Lambrecht, quote unquote, resigned. If I had to guess, and this is me putting my conspiracy cap on, if I had to guess, a group of Germans in suits approached her and said, Miss Lambrecht, you need to leave. We need to get rid of you. You're not really helping us. And if Eva Hogel becomes the defense minister, she will be much more assertive, it looks like, from what I've seen, seen in regards to what she says, in regards to her rhetoric. It looks like she will be much, much more willing to push forward with the German military revitalization. Now, this reminds me of something else, and I read about this today. Actually, I was reading about this yesterday. Shinzo Abe, he was very big, and all of you guys know this already, he was very big on allowing Japan to have more and more freedom in regards to its defense policy. And Shinzo Abe wanted Japan to have the ability to do a counterstrike on the Chinese or the North Koreans. Basically, Shinzo Abe really began the will or the pursuit for Japanese military independence. Now, his grandfather, what was his name? Nabusuke Kishi. He was also very big on this, but because Kishi was in power at the time when Second World War was very fresh in the memories of the United States, he was very much so restrained by that recent history. But now that World War II is becoming a very distant memory, and because of the rise of China, because of the prospect of China invading Taiwan, and the fact that this idea of China invading Taiwan is being perceived as a thicker reality because of the fact that Russia has invaded Ukraine, and people are thinking, well, because Russia invaded Ukraine, maybe the Chinese will have more motivation to invade Taiwan. Japan needs to become a stronger nation, and Japan needs to have all of these fetters placed upon it by the United States removed, or at least loosened. Shinzo Abe began this agenda. Shinzo Abe began this desire. But the thing with Abe was that he had resistance. He had resistance even from people within his own party. I mean, the Liberal Democratic Party isn't a monolithic party. It's very nationalistic for the most part, but nonetheless, they are people within the LDP who disagreed with the Abe agenda. After his assassination, a lot of that has changed. A lot of that has changed since his assassination. Fumio Kishida replaced Shinzo Abe. And the thing about Kishida is that he was considered to be a member of what is known as the Dove faction. The Dove faction are the more, I guess you could say, moderate faction within the Liberal Democratic Party. These are people who believe that Japan needs to just boost itself economically, needs to just grow economically, and leave the military defense of Japan to the Americans. This idea of trusting the Americans for Japan's defense is very much so dying. It's been dying for a long time, and it's being close to dead. It's getting close to just being completely dead. And after Abe died, there was all this talk about Abe's legacy, how he had this legacy of making Japan strong again. And so I guess to honor that legacy, to honor the legacy of a man who was murdered and who held huge esteem amongst the Japanese population, the Japanese politicians basically said, let's all support Abe's agenda. Because he was murdered, he's a martyr, let's honor his legacy, the legacy of making Japan strong again by supporting his agenda. So here you have Mr. Fumio Kishida, he's now in power, and he's no longer a Dove. Because remember, he was considered to be a part of the Dove faction. Well, that's not the case anymore. And Kishida is not facing the resistance that Shinzo Abe had to deal with. So after Abe was murdered, all of a sudden the agenda for reviving Japan's military strength is not getting that much resistance anymore. It's very interesting. It makes you wonder how these things work. It really does. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.